Most of us have this idea, a pretty deep-seated belief about what it takes to be happy. It usually comes down to hitting certain goals, getting that promotion, buying a bigger house, seeing more money in our bank account. But what if our basic assumptions about how happiness even works are just wrong? What if the very things we're chasing are designed to keep us exactly where we started? Let's get into it.
Okay, so here's a wild thought experiment for you. It sounds like a riddle, right? On one hand, you've got someone who just won a life-changing jackpot. I mean, that's the dream. And on the other, someone who's just suffered a truly devastating, life-altering injury. Our gut tells us their happiness levels have got to be on completely different planets, not just for a week or a month, but forever.
And this is where it gets absolutely fascinating. Because back in 1978, a landmark study did the unthinkable. It actually compared these two groups. And the results? They basically sent a shockwave through the world of psychology. To really get why, we need to start with one core concept.
And that brings us right to the heart of our first section. We're talking about this powerful psychological engine that seems to constantly pull us back to where we started, a phenomenon that researchers call the happiness treadmill.
The fancy term for this is the hedonic treadmill, or sometimes you'll hear hedonic adaptation. The idea is basically this. We all have a kind of internal happiness set point. No matter how high we jump for joy after something great happens, or how low we sink in despair after something terrible, we have this incredible tendency to drift back to our baseline. It's like we're running and running, trying so hard to get happier, but we're on a treadmill, ultimately just staying in the same place.
So let's go back to that 1978 study for a second. The researchers, led by a guy named Brickman, interviewed lottery winners and recent accident victims who are now paraplegic. And just like you'd expect, right after the event, the winners were over the moon, and the victims were, of course, devastated. But here's the kicker. When the researchers checked back in with them months later, the lottery winners weren't really any happier than a regular control group. And the accident victims, while still less happy, actually rated themselves as being more happy than unhappy. Their brains had just adapted. Their expectations reset to their new reality.
And this quote right here, it just nails the why behind the treadmill. Think about it. You get a raise at work, and for a little while, it feels amazing. But pretty soon, that new salary just becomes your salary. It's the new normal. Your expectations catch up. You start thinking about a nicer car or a bigger apartment to go with your new income, and boom, you're right back where you started, just on a more expensive treadmill.
So this all leads to a pretty heavy question, doesn't it? If we're all just running on this treadmill, is our happiness baseline totally unchangeable? Is it just, locked in from the day we're born?
Well, you might want to brace yourself for this next part. Some really famous studies on identical twins came to a pretty startling conclusion. They found that almost half, 50% of our baseline happiness level isn't determined by our job or our income or even our relationships. Nope, it's determined by our genetics. That is a huge chunk of the pie, and it suggests that a lot of our baseline is actually inherited.
For a long time, that 50% number made a lot of people think our happiness was pretty much out of our hands. But that's not the whole story. As research evolved, scientists started asking a really important question. What happens when life throws you a truly massive curveball? Can that genetic baseline actually be moved?
And this is where the science gets so much more nuanced. It turns out, while we adapt to a lot of things, we don't adapt to everything. Research has shown that certain major life events can in fact permanently shift a person's set point. Things like developing a long-term disability, losing a spouse, going through a divorce, or facing long-term unemployment, these can have a lasting negative impact that people don't fully bounce back from. So the treadmill has limits. Our baseline isn't made of concrete, it's more like a soft baseline that can be moved. This whole distinction between things we get used to and things we don't, it leads us to our third section and a really critical insight. Maybe we've been thinking about happiness all wrong, lumping too many different feelings under one single word. So, a brilliant study by researchers Yu and Chen looked at a massive amount of data from China, and they asked a super smart question. They said, okay, instead of just measuring overall life satisfaction, what if we split feelings into two buckets? Positive emotions, like joy and excitement, and negative emotions, like stress and anxiety. And what if money affects those two buckets differently? Okay, let's break down what's on this table, because it's really revealing. On the left, you've got 3 different ways to measure how we're doing: our overall life satisfaction, our positive feelings, and our negative feelings. Then, the researchers looked at how 2 types of income affected them:
First, relative income, which is basically how much money you have compared to your neighbors. And second, absolute income, just the general wealth of the area you live in. The results? Totally fascinating. When it came to feeling satisfied or feeling joy, only relative income seemed to matter. But, and this is the big one, when they looked at negative feelings, both your income compared to others and the overall income of your area had an impact.
So what on earth does that mean? Well, in plain English, it means that making more money than the people around you might give your ego a little boost and make you feel more satisfied. But just living in a wealthier area where everybody makes more money doesn't seem to make anyone feel more joy. What it does do is reduce the causes of misery, the stress of not being able to pay for food or a safe place to live or healthcare. Money, it turns out, is an amazing tool for fighting unhappiness.
And this is where the academic research lines up perfectly with what people already know in their gut. This comment from a discussion on Reddit just captures it perfectly. It's not about buying fancy cars. It's about not having a panic attack when the water heater breaks or you get a surprise medical bill. It's about buying freedom from stress.
This idea of having enough money to be free from stress brings us to a super famous number that's been talked about for years, and, well, how the goalposts for what enough means seem to keep moving.
If you've ever looked into this topic, you've probably heard this number, $75,000. A huge study back in 2010 by 2 Nobel Prize winners, Kahneman and Deaton, found that our day-to-day emotional well-being, feeling happy versus stressed out, it kind of plateaued once a household hit about $75,000 a year. After that point, more money didn't seem to buy more daily happiness. For a long, long time, this was the magic number.
But here's the catch. That study was from 2010. The cost of the things that give us that basic feeling of security, housing, education, healthcare, it hasn't just gone up a little bit. In a lot of places, it has absolutely skyrocketed. That $75,000 freedom from stress number from back then, it just doesn't buy the same peace of mind today.
And you don't have to dig through economic data to see this. You just have to listen to people. This comment from that same Reddit thread is pretty eye-opening. For a family living in an expensive city, the number they feel they need just to be comfortable, to not constantly worry about the basics, is way, way into the 6 figures. The finish line for financial security has moved. A lot.
Okay, so let's recap. We're on a treadmill, but it's not unbreakable. Money is better at fighting misery than it is at buying joy. And the amount of money we need to fight that misery keeps going up. So that brings us to our last and honestly our most important section. What do we do with this information? How do we actually step off the treadmill?
This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If we can accept that the main job of our income is to build a safe foundation and cut down on stress, that actually frees us up to look for real, lasting happiness somewhere else. So where should we be looking?
Some incredible research gives us a really powerful clue here. A researcher named Bruce Heddy found that people's long-term happiness was seriously affected by the kind of goals they chased. On one side, you've got what he called zero-sum goals. These are the competitive ones: career success, getting rich, social status. For you to win, somebody else kind of has to lose. Chasing these goals, it had a tiny or even a negative effect on well-being. But on the other side are non-zero-sum goals, things that make your life better and other people's lives better. Things like strong family relationships or helping others. These were strongly, powerfully linked to higher, more lasting happiness. Think about that. The goals based on competition leave us stuck, while the goals based on connection and contribution are the ones that actually lift us up.
So, let's just boil this all down. If you're going to remember 3 things, let it be these. First, think of money like a shield. Use it to build a moat around you and your family to protect against stress and anxiety. Second, to go on offense, to actively build happiness, look to those non-zero-sum goals. Invest your time and energy in relationships, in your community, in a sense of purpose. And finally, and this is so important, remember that you are not just a puppet of your genetic set point. Your choices, your goals, your mindset, they all matter. You have real agency here.
In the end, that hedonic treadmill is always going to be there. The second we achieve something, a new desire pops up on the horizon. But just knowing that, knowing how the machine works, that gives you power. It lets you stop, take a look at the thing you're running on, and ask a really basic question. We might always have to be running, but we get to choose the direction. We get to choose what we're running for.